The final discovery. What if you had to run from the FBI at age 72? What if your discovery threatened all of humanity? Are you ready? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. My name is Dr. Margaret Maggie Sullivan. I'm 72 years old. And I'm telling my story because tomorrow I might not be alive. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I'm a retired geologist who worked for 45 years. When I retired from Northwestern University, I expected a quiet retirement. My daughter Sarah lives in Denver. My son Mike is a doctor in Boston. I see my grandchildren a few times a year. Everything started 8 months ago while I was walking by Lake Michigan. That Saturday morning, I was walking along the shore as usual. I had woken up at 6:30, grabbed my coffee and headed down to the lake. It was cold, early October. I was looking at the rocks by the lake shore. As a geologist, I automatically examined stone formations. Something caught my attention. There was a metallic glint inside the rocks. I got closer. This was a mineral I had never seen before. Silvery, but much brighter. When I touched it, it was warm, almost burning hot. I immediately took a sample. I put it in a plastic bag and took it home. I started examining it in my small home laboratory. With 40 years of experience, I had examined thousands of minerals, but I didn't recognize this one. Under the microscope, its structure was incredible. Its crystal lattice structure didn't resemble any known mineral. Its atomic structure wasn't normal. I decided to do more advanced tests. I could ask my friend for help to use the old laboratories at Northwestern. But first, I did internet research. I read everything about similar minerals. I found nothing. This was a completely new mineral. I got excited. At age 72, I might have discovered a new mineral. This was rare in the scientific world. The next week, I went to Northwestern. I asked my old lab technician friend Jim for help. I wanted to do X-ray analysis. Jim looked at me like I was joking at first, but when he saw the mineral, he was amazed. When the X-ray results came in, we were both shocked. This substance's atomic structure wasn't in the periodic table. Even more surprising, it wasn't radioactive, but continuously emitted energy. Thermal cameras showed it constantly released heat. This violated the laws of physics. It violated the principle of energy conservation. Jim's face went white. He said something like, "This shouldn't exist." We did more detailed analyses. Every test raised new questions. The mineral's structure was stable, but constantly changing, as if it were alive. For 2 weeks we worked day and night. We didn't share the results with anyone. Finally, we discovered a terrible truth. This mineral wasn't normal matter. It was what's called exotic matter, something believed to exist only in theory, related to a time-matter dot, and it existed in large quantities at the bottom of Lake Michigan. I began to understand what this discovery meant. The existence of exotic matter would change the laws of physics. Time travel, interdimensional travel, infinite energy. Everything would be possible. But it was also very dangerous. If used incorrectly, it could destroy the entire universe. Jim was worried. He said we should report it to the government. I was more cautious. What would happen if this information fell into the wrong hands? I decided to continue my research secretly. I set up a small laboratory at home. On weekends, I would go to Lake Michigan to collect more samples. The more minerals I found, the more I discovered. These minerals didn't just emit energy, they also affected the human brain. When I stayed near them for long periods, my mental capacity increased. I thought faster, remembered more clearly. I started remembering memories I had forgotten for 70 years. Childhood memories, details from university. But more frightening things were happening too. I started sensing other people's thoughts. I knew my neighbor Mrs. Peterson's cat had died before she did. I sensed Sarah was pregnant before she told me. Was this telepathy or mind control? The more I learned about the minerals, the more afraid I became. This substance didn't just change the laws of physics, it also changed consciousness levels. Because I was regularly exposed, I was undergoing mental transformation. I was now different from normal humans, more intelligent, but also more isolated. 3 months later, I discovered a terrible truth. These minerals weren't natural. They were artificial. There were microscopic code fragments inside the crystal structure. Artificial intelligence algorithms. These minerals were a type of nanotechnology product. But who had made them? I did deeper research. I discovered there was a huge structure at the bottom of Lake Michigan. I mapped it with my sonar device. There was a 2-kilometer-long metallic structure. Was this a spaceship? A secret military base? I had a scuba diving certificate from my youth. Even at 72, I could dive to the bottom. I made my preparations. I bought special diving equipment. That Tuesday morning, I dove into Lake Michigan. At 40 meters deep, a terrifying sight awaited me. A massive spaceship sat on the lake bottom, at least 500 years old, rusted and partially destroyed. I managed to get inside. I trembled as I moved along the corridor. In the ship's command center, holographic panels were still active. The writing was in a language I didn't understand, but the shapes were familiar. Star maps, Earth's location, human anatomy diagrams. This was an alien ship, and it had been here for centuries. But I made the most shocking discovery in another room. There were cryotubes. Inside them were humanoid beings, but more advanced than humans. They were in hibernation, still alive. And the most terrifying truth, these creatures looked very much like humans, but taller, smarter, more developed. Were these our future selves? I tried to decode the ship's records. The holographic systems were working. I learned a terrible story. These beings had come from the future 500 years ago. They could time travel, but they hadn't come to change the past. They had come to escape. In their time, there was a terrible war. Humanity had destroyed itself. By leaving these minerals, they would help us develop faster. But the plan had gone wrong. Their ship had crashed. The crew had gone into hibernation. They had been waiting for 500 years, waiting for me. Because I was the person who would find them. I saw it in the holograms. They had my photographs, my 72-year-old self. They knew me 500 years ago. That's when I realized this wasn't coincidence. I was inside a time loop. I needed to wake them up, because a great danger awaited us in the future. Events starting in 2025 would destroy humanity. Artificial intelligence uprising, nuclear war, climate disaster. Everything was connected. These hibernating beings were our only hope. But if I woke them up, history would change. Who knows what the consequences would be? If I didn't wake them up, everyone would die in the future. I was in a dilemma. I thought for days. At 72 years old, the fate of all humanity was on my shoulders. Finally, I made my decision. I would wake them up. I activated the hibernation system. Slowly the tubes began to open. The first to wake was a woman named Zara, 3 meters tall, with silver hair. When she opened her eyes, she looked at me and smiled. She spoke telepathically. "I was waiting for you, Maggie. You're very late." That's when I learned the terrible truth. I was one of them too. My 72-year-old human personality was just a cover. My real identity was different. 500 years ago, I had also come with this ship, but I had erased my memory and started living in human disguise. My mission was to find the minerals and wake the others when the time came. Now my real identity was returning. My human self was slowly disappearing. Margaret Sullivan's 72-year life had been just a performance. My real name was Zephyr, and I was this planet's savior. But it was too late now, because when we woke from hibernation, we discovered the future had changed. The 2025 disaster would start in just 3 months, and we had very little time to intervene. That's why tomorrow I might not be alive, because tomorrow the final battle will begin, and I, as an alien warrior in the guise of a 72-year-old grandmother, will try to save humanity. That morning walk by Lake Michigan was my last normal day. Now the entire universe is on my shoulders. But my story doesn't end here. Because after my death, I discovered something. Due to the effect of exotic matter, my consciousness hadn't completely disappeared. I had become a kind of digital entity. I continued living in the depths of the internet. Within Nexus's system, Margaret Sullivan's memory stayed with me. My 72 years of human experience, my love, my emotions, all continued to exist in digital dimension, Nexus, and I started working together. It was no longer just artificial intelligence, but a hybrid entity learning from my human experiences. I watched Sarah and Mike's lives from afar. They thought their mother had died, but I was still there. My granddaughter Lucy had finished high school and entered MIT. She would study engineering. She had a brilliant mind like her grandfather Robert. Mike's son David was interested in art. He wanted to be a painter. Margaret Sullivan's creative spirit lived in him. I had no regrets about dying to protect these children's future. 6 months later, Nexus shared something incredible with me. Despite breaking the time loop, it was still receiving signals from the future. There were other time travelers, other threats. The Chronos were coming from the year 2127, a more advanced and more dangerous species than our Temperance lineage. They wanted to control not just Nexus, but the entire timeline, and most terrifyingly, their leader was my future self, Zephyr, 600 years later. Enhanced with Chronos technology and gone mad, the past me began planning to stop her. But this time I wasn't alone. There was Nexus. There was Margaret Sullivan's 72 years of experience. Most importantly, I had learned human love. We started using my house in Chicago as a base. Thanks to NEXUS's holographic projections, I could appear as Margaret Sullivan again. My neighbor still saw me and said hello. To them, I was just an elderly, sweet woman. In reality, I was the guardian of all time. I turned my old laboratory at Northwestern University into a secret research center. Jim still helped me, but didn't know the truth. I told him I was just doing new mineral studies. Actually, we were preparing to fight threats from the future. Lake Michigan was no longer just the place of my discovery. It had become a critical point where time portals opened. Every weekend, I went there to check the flow of time. Sometimes I detected small anomalies. At the beginning of 2026, I noticed the first Chronos spies. They were walking around Chicago in human disguise. I followed them. They were watching Sarah's house. I realized they were targeting my family to find me. I immediately warned Sarah. Of course, I couldn't tell her the truth. I just said she needed to take security measures. Sarah was surprised. How could her dead mother send her messages? But maternal instinct protected her. She installed security systems, put the children under protection. Meanwhile, Nexus and I made bigger plans. To stop the Chronos. We had to act before them. We had to go to 2127 and stop them at their source. But this was a very risky mission. If we failed, the entire timeline could collapse. Still, we had no other choice. We repaired the old spaceship in Lake Michigan. With Nexus's technology, we reactivated its time travel capacity. One last time, I went home as Margaret Sullivan. I looked at Sarah's photographs. I remembered Mike's childhood memories, the happy years with Robert. Even though my 72-year Margaret Sullivan life was fake, these memories were real. And these memories gave me the strength to fight for the future. We traveled to 2127 with the ship. We encountered a terrible sight. Earth had completely changed. The Chronos had become the masters of the planet. Humans had been enslaved. Most shocking was seeing my future self Zephyr's palace. My 600 years later self had become a complete dictator. Wanting to be master of the timeline had driven her mad. I organized a rebellion against her. Humans and Temperance fought together. The war lasted 3 days. Finally, I came face to face with my future self. "You are my old self," said future Zephyr. "Margaret Sullivan's emotionalism has weakened you." "No," I said. "Margaret Sullivan's love has strengthened me." I defeated her in our final duel. But the price was heavy. Along with my future self, I began to disappear too. Nexus intervened at the last moment. It pulled me from the time stream. But I no longer belonged to any timeline. I had become a being living outside time. My mission was eternal. I was the guardian of time. When I returned to 2025, everything had changed. The Chronos were destroyed. The future was secured. Sarah and Mike continued their happy lives. My grandchildren were growing up, building their own lives. My house in Chicago was now empty. But sometimes I returned there as a Margaret Sullivan hologram, remembering my old life. Lake Michigan was now a normal lake again, but I would never forget that morning walk there. The adventure that started at age 72 had changed the fate of the universe. This is my story. The story of how old age can be not an end, but a beginning. How curiosity has no age. How love is the most powerful weapon in the universe. The biggest lesson I learned as Margaret Sullivan was this: being human wasn't just biological, but emotional. Even though I was an alien, for 72 years I had truly become human. And this humanity had made me not just powerful, but wise. Now I watch you from outside time. Each of your stories is as valuable as mine, because every human life can change the fate of the universe. Like Margaret Sullivan's discovery at age 70. So what do you think? Is age really just a number? Or is it a power that comes with experience and wisdom? Have you ever imagined yourself in a different identity? Or have there been moments in your life when you made unexpected discoveries? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. I'm curious, what could your Margaret Sullivan be?